Hi, I'm Oliver. This is Deep Cuts, a channel dedicated to music for lovers of music. Today I'm going to do 5 albums to get you into classic prog. Prog's definitely a very contentious genre in the musical community. There's some people absolutely love it, some people absolutely despise it. I speak to people sometimes and they have so much vitriol and hatred for prog rock. They think it's pompous, they think some of the fantasy-esque concepts are really stupidly overblown. Some of the experimental lyricism and the grandiose musicality of the music, they just absolutely hate. I personally fall into the former camp. I think you can find some of the most musically diverse, interesting, eclectic pieces of music within this genre. It's so exciting. There's so much here to really get your teeth into. I've decided to do a classic prog video and then I'll do a modern prog follow-up just because there's too much to do the prog as an entire genre, and I don't want to try and do half classic and half modern because they're so wildly different. And as you get into the modern phase of prog, you start getting into the metal side of prog, the more Latino rock influenced prog. There's more eclectic prog, there's throwback prog as well, and I don't want to water this down, so I'll do this classic prog video and then about a month's time I'll upload a modern prog video as well. Number 1, King Crimson, In the Court of the Crimson King, released in 1969. These guys exploded onto the scene when they supported the Rolling Stones in Hyde Park back in '69. It was before the album was released, and people were just blown away by their musicianship and their technical ability. They just ripped it up. You can still see some of the footage, I think. I'll link it down below if I can find it on YouTube. It's just unbelievable what they were achieving as a trio as well. It sounded so heavy, so brutally heavy, and quite forward thinking for its time as well. The lineup has changed consistently over the decades of Crimson existence, but Robert Fripp, the guitarist and songwriter, has been the linchpin throughout. So the band's constantly been changing around him, but he's always been there creating very diverse, very experimental pieces of music. If you've never come across Fripp before, check out his discography. The man's done so many things. I mean, aside from the countless King Crimson projects that he's done, you've also got the fact that he worked with Brian Eno and David Bowie on Bowie's incredibly perfect Berlin trilogy, and he's done a lot of ambient works alongside Eno as well. And to be honest, his discography just goes on forever and ever, so make sure you check him out as a little side note. The album art is actually as iconic as the music itself, and the artist Barry Godber did the painting as a concept of the titular Schizoid Man, which is the first track of this album. And it's in turn horrifying, perverse, but also you can't take your eyes off it either. This album is definitely regarded as one of the most influential rock albums of all time, with opening track 21st Century Schizoid Man, starting with 30 seconds of silence, I think it's 30 seconds, followed up with this powerful detonation of overdriven guitar, blaring horns and crashing drums. It shocks the listener straight away off the bat. This is such a vibrant album. It has moments of intensity and complexity like 21st Century Schizoid Man, and then it has pulled back ballads where flute and mellotron take centre stage, like I Talk to the Wind, which is the second track on the album. The variety of moods is a result of the experimental instrumentalism of the band. So even hard, rocky tracks like 21st Century Schizoid Man have this otherworldly, ethereal slant to them. There's a dramatic tension to the whole album. It's a theatricality that I feel has influenced many of the concept, narrative-based prog albums that have come after it. Closing track, In the Court of the Crimson King, is a towering and emotional closer that kind of sounds like this roaring, rousing chorus of the end of the world. Number 2, Genesis, Selling England by the Pound, released in 1973. Now there are two very clear periods to Genesis. You have the early prog folk influenced Genesis, fronted by Peter Gabriel on vocals, and then you got the pop Genesis, fronted by Phil Collins, who was the drummer. Gabriel left, did his own proggy thing, and Collins came. Personally, I fucking hate Phil Collins. I can't stand him. He irritates me to no end. But their prog days with Peter Gabriel as band leader and vocalist produced some powerful, influential prog albums, Probably the most successful being Selling England by the Pound. This one's a prog album with a lyrical concept based around the idea that capitalism is destroying our culture and the idea that American culture's rushing in and changing British culture as we know it. Apparently at this point Genesis were tired of music critics saying that they'd sold out for American audiences, which I think is where a lot of this comes from. You've got a reference to British sterling in the title. It's very English, a lot of the lyrics. There's references to a kind of British stamp. In addition to that, many of the tracks have an English folky influence. This album has an inclusion of the mellotron again, so at this point King Crimson had used it as it's been established as a tool for prog music, and Genesis are now using it too. At this point, mellotron was prog. The opening track, Dancing with the Moonlit Night, is an enigmatic shapeshifter of a track. It starts off with Gabriel's falsetto lyrics, lilting folk-style guitars, and then arpeggiated piano come in. Then we have a jumping from melodrama to playful but complex and interesting instrumental wizardry, really. It's a bizarre thing if you've never heard this kind of prog before. This kind of sounds like some sort of futuristic jousting tournament soundtrack. It's so strange. Also, as much as I admit to my dislike of Phil Collins, there's no denying that his drumming skills on this track are fantastic. He's got dynamic, punchy sections. His fills are all on point. I can't really argue with his percussive skill. Just don't fucking talk. The next track on the album, I Know What You Like in Your Wardrobe. Seriously, that's the name of the track. It's a more straightforward, airy pop track, but Gabriel's lyrics focus on lambasting English upper-class youth. So even though this is probably the most poppy, mainstream track you get on the album, the lyrics are still giving it a weight. The rest of the album is filled with prog epics like The Battle for Epping Forest, The Cinema Show, and Firth of Firth as well. Moments like Steve Hackett's beautiful guitar solo interlude on Firth of Firth and Tony Banks' 7/4 keyboard part on The Cinema Show just make this a complete pinnacle of prog rock history. Number 3, Rush. Moving Pictures, released in 1981. Rush are a wildly famous prog trio from Canada who have been doing it for a while. This is definitely a more radio-friendly prog album. What they're playing on this and what they've written is pretty close to hard rock, I would say. It's not like the experimentalism of In the Court of the Crimson King or Selling England by the Pound. I would say that they're a fairly contentious band in the prog rock community. Some people absolutely hate Geddy Lee's vocals. I personally don't have an issue with them. I mean, they're not the most mind-blowing vocals I've ever heard, but they do the job. For the most part, or for me personally anyway, you're probably listening to Rush for the musicality and the musicianship. So Neil Peart's incredible drumming, so influential. You've got Alex Lifeson's fantastic guitar playing, and also Geddy Lee's a pretty damn good bassist as well. Alongside the radio-friendly hits that I've discussed, so such as Tom Sawyer and Red Barchetta, you have the track YYZ, which is just an instrumental maelstrom of a track. It showcases all of the band's musical talents individually, without ever becoming this blanket of noise which sometimes happens when you get a load of brilliant musicians in a room together. It's not 3 musicians fighting for supremacy, it's 3 musicians working cohesively to deliver an exciting piece of music. The most typically prog track is probably the 11-minute The Camera Eye. The track jumps virtuosically from section to section with Neil Peart's drumming dynamically anchoring the track, but also blasting into new sections with these really powerful triplet fills. I would say this is definitely a brilliant album to begin with when you're looking at classic prog. It's quite accessible, but at the same time it'll give you an idea of what to expect with progressive rock. Number 4, yes, Fragile, released in 1971. Yet another hugely influential progressive rock band. This album saw the introduction of Rick Wakeman on the keyboards, obviously a very famous keyboard player. So the introduction of the mellotron and the moog into their sound. So there you go, mellotron number 3 that we've discussed on this so far. It's fucking everywhere in classic prog. Along with Rick, the group had players that left their individual mark on the prog genre, such as Bill Bruford, who eventually moved to King Crimson, along with Robert Fripp, and guitarist Steve Howe, who had projects with bands like GTR and Asia and countless other albums. This album's a real mixture of influences, and that actually came down to the fact that at this point, Yes didn't have much money to record Fragile. They were running out. So what they did was they had 4 tracks on the album that they worked together collaboratively, and 5 tracks that they assigned to each individual member of the band to work on themselves and act as a band leader when it came to recording. So the result is very varied styles and tones. To me, it feels like the solo work tracks are almost vignettes which set you up for the epic 11-minute prog tracks. So with tracks like Rick Wakeman's Cans and Brahms is a tribute and ode to Brahms, the classical composer, and then Bill Bruford's 35-second track, 5% of Nothing. They're very eclectic, they're very interesting, but I feel like they're there to set you up for those epic prog tracks that really showcase everybody's dynamism and talent as a whole. Did you just hear how I said dynamism? I really trip over that word every single time. So the 8 to 11 epic tracks I'm talking about are the opening Roundabout, the A-side closer South Side of the Sky, and then the perfect finale, Heart of the Sunrise. Heart of the Sunrise is just a brilliant journey to mark the end of this varied, interesting, experimental, and sometimes challenging album. The most successful thing about this track is its use of recapitulation. So that's taking a theme and changing whether you change the tone, whether you change the key, or the instrument that's playing the melody. The result of that is this ever-shifting, ever-changing piece of music that by the time you get to the end of the track, they have modulated the melody so it's sitting a little bit higher than it was at the beginning. And the result of that is you just want to hear the whole track played over and over again. It could just go back around again, and that's what's so beautiful about this track. I could listen to this on repeat. Right, and number 5, Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here, released in 1975. So final album, Pink Floyd, the inimitable Pink Floyd. This was actually their follow-up to their 8th LP, Dark Side of the Moon, which everybody's heard of. What a fucking album to have to follow up. Now personally, I prefer Wish You Were Here to Dark Side, and I know that a lot of people out there are going to chase me with pitchforks for that. But, you know, go out and listen to both of them and tell me what you think anyway. I personally feel like Wish You Were Here is more of a cohesive journey than Dark Side. The album is bookmarked with the track Shine On You Crazy Diamond, parts 1 and parts 2, with 3 tracks nestled in between. The album oozes a sadness, but also a confidence for what they're doing, and Roger Waters and Dave Gilmour don't feel the need to ram every single track with complex musicianship, tricky, challenging songwriting. There's no need for it. They use the instrumentation, they use their songwriting skills in a way that engulfs you in the record. The opening of Shine is cold layered synthesizers that cushion Gilmour's beautiful clean guitar tone. And that goes on for a very long time before we hit the meat of the track. But as far as I'm concerned, that section could go on for 4 hours. It's just so gorgeous. The band uses choirs and organ to construct a very somber tone for Shine. A lot of it was based on ex-member Syd Barrett's mental breakdown, alongside their feelings of loneliness and isolation, being in this whole new world of fame that they were experiencing after the release of Dark Side of the Moon. It's a very somber track. Second track, Welcome to the Machine, is a minor key ballad with spacey keys and otherworldly synth sounds, with this clean acoustic guitar and lamenting vocals by Roger Waters. There's these piercing synth lines in this track which adds a real stunning emotive quality to the track. But what's interesting is the next track, Have a Cigar, is like this slow, sludgy swamp rock track. But they keep the synth line throughout that. It goes from the second track to the third track, and even though these are such wildly different pieces of music, that adds a bridge. It bridges these 2 tracks over, so it really feels like they're connected sonically. The closing track of this record, which is part 2 of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, is a sad but beautiful piece of music. It links back to the first track thematically, it's got the same melodies, but it allows an instrumental foray for Dave Gilmour and co to be able to express their musicality a little bit more. It's just an utterly classic record. Go out and listen to this one. Kind of wish I put this album at the beginning rather than the end. It's just such a brilliant album. It's a really good starter into prog rock. Fuck it, just go and listen to all of it. There you have it, there's my top 5 to get you into classic prog. Please comment below, tell me the prog albums that you would have picked. Tell me that my opinion's wrong about smug, baldy Phil Collins if you like. There's a Spotify playlist as well for the albums that I've discussed. There's also more albums to get you into classic prog, so hopefully any albums that I haven't included that you go, you fucking twat, why haven't you included those? They'll be in there, hopefully. Thanks a lot, see you next week.